The Master of Happy Endings by Jack Hodgins. The Master of Happy Endings is a story about an older retired man named Axel Thorstad and the adventures he continues to have at his age. The book begins and Axel is stagnant. He has been grieving the death of his wife and the loss of his teaching career for 7 long years on a small island. Eventually, he gets fed up with the feeling of uselessness, so he puts an ad in the paper, offering his services as a tutor in exchange for room and board. He gets a few letters back, but it's in Chapter 3 that he gets the first serious response from Mrs. Montana. Her son Travis is an actor and needs someone to help him pass his exams. Axel agrees that he will help and ends up being shipped off to Hollywood in LA. There, he proceeds to reflect on his father's story, a stuntman for Centurion Pictures who died making a jump off a building, and his teaching years. He fights with an interfering producer, meets up with some old friends, gets beat up by a gang of teenagers, and finds out the true circumstances of his father's disappearance. The most well-described setting in the novel is Axel's Island. It is described as small and a little bit chaotic. There are few inhabitants, and they all live in moderate or run-down homes. The town is incredibly small, containing only a few shops with the bare necessities. I think the way the author describes the town makes it come across as a sort of a place for misfits, and that's partially why Axel fits in there so well. He's this super tall man who is friends with an uneducated woman, and a man that always has tons of books but no money. Weird things are always happening, and everything is just odd enough that the island feels like its own world, drastically changing things when Axel goes to LA. The biggest change in Axel's character is how his perspective on life morphs throughout the book. In the beginning, he is withdrawn and lonely. He believes everyone else sees him as a waste of space or someone they're all just waiting to get rid of because of his age. When he meets a past student in a homeless shelter, he blames himself for encouraging the man to go down a path that would eventually lead him to poverty. He also puts the blame on himself when Travis cannot seem to find time to study for his exams and is also struggling with his acting career. However, as he reflects more, he realizes things might not all be his fault. He stops listening to the chiding voice of his wife in his head and contemplates that maybe the way people see him is less important after all. He spends time with people, chats with his friends, and overall seems less grumpy and hopeless at the end of the book than he does at the start. Jack Hodgins, like Axel Thorstad, was a teacher before retiring. Just like Axel, Hodgins was probably struggling with the idea of a loss of identity. A retiree might not know what to do with themselves once they are no longer working, and Hodgins' own journey into writing might have been what inspired him to write about Axel's adventures. My own grandfather is a retired mechanic, a man who always needs to be busy. He struggled to find things to do to keep him occupied in the beginning too, but now he volunteers as a driver at their local hospital as transportation for cancer treatment patients. The theme of The Master of Happy Endings is that life may continue to present new adventures and opportunities as long as one chooses to notice and act on them. On page 321, near the end of the book, there is an excellent line. Perhaps it would be better to disbelieve in endings altogether. This quote does a really good job encompassing the message of the book, and when I read it, it hit me hard. There's so much emphasis placed on that line that there's no way it could possibly not be important. The conflict in the novel is man versus self. Axel spends so much of the novel trying to find his purpose, just to realize in the end that he shouldn't base his worth off of how his interactions with other people might have affected their future. He also realizes that just because one chapter of his life is over, that doesn't mean his entire life needs to end. This sort of advice applies to so many people. You can always keep going, and you are not defined by other people.